Hello and welcome to today's message. Today we're going to be looking at Jeremiah 20 verses 7 to 18. Have you ever felt grumpy? Have you ever felt like ranting or complaining? Have you ever felt like you don't know how to pray about things? Well, if so, today's message is for you. The title of today's talk is A Cry of Pain, but I'd like to suggest that we could also call this message, It's Okay to be Not Okay, but with a little caveat of, but please talk to God about it. So let's start by reading the passage from Jeremiah. As I said, it's chapter 20, verses 7 to 18. It's titled Jeremiah's Complaint. You deceived me, Lord, and I was deceived. You overpowered me and prevailed. I am ridiculed all day long. Everyone mocks me. Whenever I speak, I cry out, proclaiming violence and destruction. So the word of the Lord has brought me insult and reproach all day long. But if I say I will not mention his word or speak any more in his name, his word is in my heart like a fire shut up in my bones. I am weary of holding it in. Indeed, I cannot. I hear many whispering, terror on every side. Denounce him, let's denounce him. All my friends are waiting for me to slip, saying, perhaps he will be deceived, then we will prevail over him and take our revenge on him. But the Lord is with me, like a mighty warrior. So my persecutors will stumble and not prevail. They will fail and be thoroughly disgraced. Their dishonour will never be forgotten. Lord Almighty, you who examine the righteous and probe the heart and mind, let me see your vengeance on them. For to you I have committed my cause. Sing to the Lord, give praise to the Lord. He rescues the life of the needy from the hands of the wicked. Cursed be the day I was born. May the day my mother bore me not be blessed. Cursed be the man who brought my father the news, who made him very glad, saying, a child is born to you, a son. May that man be like the towns the Lord overthrew without pity. May he hear wailing in the morning, a battle cry at noon. For he did not kill me in the womb, with my mother as my grave, her womb enlarged forever. Why did I ever come out of the womb, to see sorrow and trouble, and to end my days in shame? Wow. Dear, Jeremiah is having a really bad day in the office. He's having a good old rant and complain at God. Now, we've been hearing about Jeremiah and his mission for several weeks, and he's had a tough time, hasn't he? Like, he's been called to challenge people, but you know what? Today he's going to challenge us too. We've learnt some amazingly practical things from Jeremiah, and I've absolutely loved these last few weeks. He offers us great wisdom and advice on how to live our lives now, which is fantastic. So amongst other things, we've learned about or talked about taking care of the planet, thinking about how we live more environmentally friendly, conscious lives. You know, we've talked about idols and thought about what the idols might be in our lives today. We've heard last week from Asher about God shaping us like the potter shapes the clay and our response to that, plus many other things. But again today, we've got another opportunity to learn from Jeremiah. And his lesson today is about hard times. Because Jeremiah had to say things that people just didn't want to hear. People were in total denial of what he was saying. Well, this passage is about Jeremiah telling us about his woes and feelings. I suppose what a dreadful time he's having. And you heard towards the end of the passage, it's like he wishes that it hadn't even been born. It's quite sort of shocking, really. He's definitely having a hard time, and he's letting God know about it. He's lamenting, he's ranting, he's complaining. And actually within there, you will have heard he's even questioning his calling. He's questioned the messages that God has asked him to bring. He's being dismissed and really persecuted by his friends. He's met with scorn, he's met with opposition, he's met with hostility, and he's even questioning his very existence. Poor old Jeremiah. You know, I am feeling very, very sorry for him. But you know what? I absolutely love him for this, because he's got this honesty about him that can seem really shocking. It sounds really shocking, doesn't it? Some of the stuff he's talking about. Wow. And that's actually a rare thing. You know, being able to be that honest about your feelings, and I suppose especially to be that open and honest with God. He just doesn't hold back in this. Jeremiah's doing basically what God tells him to do. He's doing what he's been asked to do. So he's entitled to a cry of pain. His rant at God is actually okay. And the great news is, we don't have to hide from God either. It's beautiful. He knows us inside out. He knows every cell of our bodies. He has created us and made us. How amazing. So the great news is we can be honest with God. We can pour out our hearts to him. We can pour out our pain, our protest, our anger, our anxiety. We just don't have to pretend with God. And actually, Jesus was actually the most amazing example of this. You know, he was a disciple of God. He had to leave his calling and go to the cross. Now, obviously, thankfully, we don't have to die in the same way he did. But we do have to make painful choices, and we do have to deal with those really difficult situations. So I just want us to have a little think about Jesus, and particularly when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, and those really precious moments that he spent in prayer. They can really speak to us and help us talk to us about how to talk to God, pour out our hearts to him, and be real with him. So the passage, I think, really speaks clearly, but let's read Matthew 26 verses 36 to 39. Then Jesus went with his disciples to a place called Gethsemane, and he said to them, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." He took Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee along with him, and he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." Going a little further, he fell with his face to the ground and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. Yet not as I will, but as you will." That passage really speaks to me and moves me greatly, as I'm sure it will all of you. Such a poignant moment in Jesus' life, and such a critical kind of prayer. And there's a great template around that prayer that John Mark Comer from Bridgetown Church shares. He's the guy that wrote that book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. But this template is about how to come before God to pray for ourselves when it's really tough. It's really incredible. And you know what? I absolutely love it. It's helped me a lot. And so what I'd like to do is share that with you now. So it's about looking at those moments when you don't know how to pray, or you don't know what to pray at all. So just looking at the passage really briefly, Jesus went to Gethsemane to pray, and it says he was really sorrowful and troubled. He said, "My soul is overwhelmed even to the point of death." He went on further and he fell on his face and he said, "My Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." And in doing that, he is really clearly presenting his feelings and desires to God, and then his trust in God. So firstly, his feelings. Jesus says, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. And, looking at the Bible, it tells us that at this point he prayed so earnestly that his sweat became like drops of blood. And there's a name for this, and it's called hematidrosis. I've probably said it wrong, but it's a very rare condition. It's extreme anguish, basically, or physical strain cause the capillary blood vessels to dilate and burst, and it mixes sweat and blood. And at this point, Jesus is completely sorrowful and troubled within, and he doesn't hold back. He's literally pouring out to God how he feels. And then secondly, his desire. He says, my Father, if possible, let this cup pass from me. And that word cup, it's a Jewish idiom. It's like a figure of speech for like your lot in life. And we hear about it again in Psalm 23, where it speaks about my cup overfloweth. But here Jesus is referring to his life that will be taken away. Now, we all have our cup to bear. Life just doesn't go in a straightforward way. We all have suffering, and we all need to express those desires, rants, complaints, and just raves. Jesus could choose to go to the cross, but we can choose what we do. Jesus is asking the Father not to go to the cross, and he's giving that massive desire to God in prayer. Then finally, his trust. So Jesus says, nevertheless, yet not as I will, but as you will. He's saying, I let go. Have your way. I give it over to you. I give everything to you. We're going to think a little bit more about that at the end of this message, okay? But I want to talk about someone else as well who had a really tough life. And they wrote a book called Nevertheless. And nevertheless means in spite of. And the book was written by John Kirkby, who set up CAP. And his journey is really quite amazing. It's staggering, in fact. It's a true reflection of a life full of challenge, especially when you feel called by God to basically do something. John felt called by God to set CAP up in 1996, and he set it up with a £10 note in his back bedroom. Amazing for a start. But up to that point, his life had been so hard. But by this point, he had come to faith. He'd become a Christian in 1992, but he was heavily in debt. And at that point, his marriage was breaking up, and it finally did so. He lost his house. He found himself destitute, and there was so much going on for him. It was bad, really bad. Life was really tough, and he literally just kept facing mountain after mountain and like obstacles that could have stopped him on that journey. What I want to do is just read just a few snippets from his book. I'm going to read a few sections really, so you can hear what was going on and what he faced. And I'll just say a little bit more about this when I've finished. But he says, this is really very early days of CAP, so 1996. Over the next year, I gradually fell apart. I was a completely broken man, living in a shell, shattered and breaking up. I used to look after my two girls, Jasmine, then age 7, and Jessica, 4, every alternate weekend from Friday to Sunday and 1 night a week. I lived in a room at my friend Stan's house where he looked after me and was very supportive. When the girls stayed, we had to use 2 camp beds in my one small room. I would often just cry looking at them, both asleep next to me. The word destitute is often overused, but that's what I became, utterly devoid of any spirits, hurting, lonely and afraid. I know now that God used this and other desperate experiences in my life for good. It was through these traumatic times that a greater sense of his love, forgiveness and heart for me became more and more real. I also began to have an ever-increasing compassion for others who were in need. So that's the first snippet. Here's the second one. In the midst of all this, I was struggling with the way so many people responded so negatively to our work and vision. Christians berated me for, as they saw it, my lack of responsibility for my own family's needs. Surely I should get a proper job and provide for my wife and children. Other people thought because we lived in a nice house that had some sort of stash of cash. How wrong could they have been? We were living from week to week. Our mortgage was more than the house was worth and was beginning to go unpaid. And we were struggling with the remainder of our debts. Collection companies were threatening us with court action. Some people just blanked us. We couldn't understand why people were not willing to encourage and support us. Accusations were made against my personal integrity, suggesting my whole reason for starting CAP was my own financial gain. I was accused of trying to make money out of the very people I was trying to help. All my efforts were utterly mocked and venomously attacked. Who did I think I was that what I was trying to achieve? Nothing I'd done before had amounted to much, so who was I trying to kid? Even my Christian faith was called into question and ridiculed. It's really tough stuff, isn't it? Here's the next bit. Our personal situation is very difficult. We are 2.5 months behind with our mortgage. Although the building society has been very understanding, we know that if by April this year we are unable to have some possibility of maintaining the mortgage payments, we'll be forced to sell the house. It's probably worth less than the mortgage. With interest being added and a monthly payment of £800, losing the house is something I've faced before. And although it would be a traumatic event, the most important thing for me would be that I could see the Lord moved us on, not that we lost the house. I'm also concerned about how my wonderful wife Lizzie, and in particular my 2 girls, Jasmine and Jessica, would cope with the loss of their home. We need another £800 per month just to pay the bills and remaining debts. Where will this income of £1,600 a month come from? And to the next bit. This is just a month or so later. Over the weekend, the building society called and stated that they would not accept my request for a couple of months to try and sort things out. They would start proceedings and actions to protect their interest. After much prayer, we decided today we would put our wonderful house up for sale. We were 3 months behind with our mortgage. We believe that God will provide for us, but if he has any other ideas or plans, then we want to remain open. I will put a sign up in faith that if God wants us to keep the house, he's big enough to do it and provide the money in time. I feel a bit like Abraham when God said, sacrifice your son. I'm just going to pick out 1 or 2 lines. It's times like this that you are tempted and really wonder what's happening to you. And then a couple of people came to him. One of them said, firstly, my friend Avril said we could stay in her caravan in the garden if we lost the house. And 2 of our friends said they would make a monthly donation. They believe in us and they will help us. I pray that the Lord will meet me just where I am in the situation of destitution and need. I know he will, and that somehow he will find a way in the darkness. Can you imagine? Can you just imagine? He's trying to set up a new charity, a Christian charity to help people, and he is literally every week, even every day, he's coming up against something. He just didn't give in. It was so very, very tough setting up CAP and really pursuing what he believed in. He kept praying and seeking God and walking in obedience to him. The challenges kept coming. And even when I joined CAP in 2008, which was 11 years after those sections I've just read you, we weren't able to be paid our full monthly salary on time because we still didn't get enough income into the charity to pay people their full wage on time. We'd wait 2 or 3 months for the part of our wage that we were willing to defer. And John had already done that for 12 years at that point. You'll probably be familiar with the CAP story, and CAP is now helping thousands of people in the UK and internationally each year with debt and poverty. They're seeing many people come to faith and grow in God. They're seeing lives changed, and generational poverty lifted. And if John hadn't persisted and hadn't prayed and seeked God, would CAP be here today? If you want to know more about Christians Against Poverty, then please feel free to contact me. I'll be really happy to speak to you about it. All the people I've spoken about today have had really hard times in their lives. They're in totally different parts of history. Jeremiah, Jesus, and then John Coakby. They've all come to God with their troubles, their rants, their feelings, their desires. They've trusted God in spite of what was going on in their lives. So if you feel grumpy or you need to rant or complain, don't forget to pray. Talk to our amazing God, because nothing that you say to him is going to make him not love you. Before we end, I'd love us to pray. I just want to take a minute or two here. Let's go back to that prayer that Jesus did in the Garden of Gethsemane. So let's make ourselves comfortable. Find a really comfy chair. Just sit and relax. Breathe in God's presence and just take a great big deep breath. Really relax yourself and open your mind and your soul to him. So let's start. Let's pray through your feelings. How are you feeling? Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you numb? Are you scared? Are you stressed? Are you angry? Just tell God how you're feeling. And then just take a moment and give God your desires. And then finally give God your trust. Yield the control over to God and make Jesus' prayer your own. Not my will, but your will be done. And live in that peace and that joy and that love. Amen.